Um, I'm open to any questions you might have. As Jay said, I'm unable to fly out here on Tuesday for Sarah's funeral because of meetings in Washington, but I very much wanted to be with the family as much time as possible. So I flew out this morning, already spent a few hours, and I'll go back there this evening, fly back to Washington tomorrow morning. Sarah was an employee at the embassy. I got to know her over the past few months. She was sunshine. She used to come in the morning, redhead, with a big, beautiful smile, and just light up the embassy with life. She was tragically cut down by somebody screaming, "Free, free Palestine." So I'll talk a little bit about the new anti-Semitism in follow-up to any questions you might have on the event in Washington. There are a number of avenues that are being investigated. It's not clear exactly how the perpetrator, how the murderer carried out his murder. But one of the avenues being investigated is the possibility that he had entered before and identified in some way the embassy employees. It's not conclusive. It's being determined through law enforcement agencies, and we're waiting to see. But why don't you follow through with any questions you might have, and I'll get to the issues I'm sure that interest you the most.
Sir, you had mentioned new anti-Semitism that, I guess could be fueling attacks like these. Could you put a definition of that? What do you notice, or what do you see as the new anti-Semitism that needs to be addressed?
I think this is very important. I think this is the key issue when it comes to combating anti-Semitism. Look, anti-Semitism is as old as the Jewish people. From the moment that Abraham said, man doesn't create God, God creates man, there was anti-Semitism. There was a lot of opposition to that idea. It was revolutionary. From that moment on, we've had all sorts of forms of anti-Semitism. The latest form is anti-Semitism disguised as anti-Israelism or anti-Zionism. So that allows people to say, I've got no problem with Jews, only with Zionists. The problem with that, of course, is that there is no Judaism without Zionism. That's how Judaism began, with Abraham ascending the Promised Land. The centrality of the land of Israel to the people of Israel is as central as are the Ten Commandments to the people of Israel. So we have not come back to the land of Israel as colonizers, as interlopers, as occupiers. We've come back as an indigenous people to the land of Israel. And when you have this frenzied scream on campuses, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, what in effect that's saying is the elimination of Israel. It's a genocidal chant. And that's what this murderer in Washington was screaming, free, free Palestine, which is the beginning of the chant, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. This is an eliminationist ideology disguised as anti-Zionism, which in effect is the anti-Semitism of old. So it takes on forms, changes forms. Right now, it's disguised as anti-Zionism, but it's a new form of anti-Semitism.
Can you talk about the conversations you had with the family here and why it was so important for you to come here, and what was that like?
Well, I'll tell you, I've been on the other side of the knock on the door. I lost my son a year and a half ago, who led the IDF into Gaza. He was a special ops commander, and he fell on the 15th day of the war in a booby-trapped tunnel in northern Gaza. I remember the knock on the door. I remember the shock. pain that doesn't go away. He was my oldest son, first one to call me dad. And when Sarah and Yaron fell, I understood that it was my responsibility as ambassador to call the parents, be the one to inform them. This time I was knocking on the door, not answering the door. And I did my best to comfort them on the phone, but comfort when you're announcing the worst of all is very difficult. So I wanted to follow through, fly out here to spend some time, spend a few hours. After the meeting this evening, I'll go back there to say goodnight and embrace them again. What we need to show is a lot of love, a lot of compassion, a lot of understanding. And hopefully help the Milgrims begin a process of healing. The pain never goes away, but you learn how to live for the life that has been taken. So I get up every morning and put my son on my shoulders and run through the day and asking him for direction sometimes, but certainly for strength. And that's what I told the Milgrims today, Bob and Nancy. They have beautiful memories that they're going to retrieve, and those retrievable memories are going to allow them to persevere.
What conversations are you having with them? Having your own personal experiences, this happening far too often within your community, what conversations are you having with them to help them find peace?
Well, first of all, you share your own experience. You share your own, you share an embrace. I can feel the pain. I understand the pain. And the conversation we're having is that this falls into the category of a very long history of Jews, lovers of Zion, many Christians, who have paid a very steep price, sometimes their lives, for the sake of an ideal, the ideal of fulfillment of the prophecies of Isaiah, the Jewish people returning to their homeland. That irritates a lot of people. It's unsettling. But if you see yourself in the cadence of history, you put yourself into a broader picture of history, that you can find consolation in that. There's many Jewish prayers in the holiest days of the year that focus on those who have given their lives in order to perpetuate the Jewish people. And Sarah is one of those people. I mean, look, my son was on the battlefront, but so was she. You know, we're fighting a 7-front war. This is the 8th front, the diplomatic front, because the attempt to delegitimize the state of Israel, to demonize the state of Israel, to call us war criminals, while we're trying to do everything conceivable to limit collateral damage and end this war with victory. We can end it tomorrow if we roll over and play dead, but we're not going to do that. This war has to end in victory. We have a blood cult, a death cult sitting on our border that built 450 miles of tunnels underground in order to hold people hostage, in order to store missiles in which they shoot into our civilian population centers. This is an enemy that has to be defeated. They hide behind civilians. And, you know, as I told many of our critics in Washington, if you have a solution, come and suggest it. One of the biggest experts in urban warfare, John Spencer, who's a professor at West Point, has said that what we are confronting in Gaza is unprecedented in the annals of urban warfare. So we're doing our best. We're trying very hard. War is not easy. War is very difficult. But at the end of the day, Sarah, who was making our case in public diplomacy in Washington fell on the battlefront of our public diplomacy, of our commitment to explaining what Israel is doing, what Israel's about.
Could you explain more of the work that she leaves behind that she was doing at the embassy?
She was in, well, we have a big public diplomacy department, and for example, most of my day is White House, is Congress, Senate, major Jewish organizations, major Christian organizations, but we have a public diplomacy department, which is liaison with churches, with synagogues, with organizations, with bringing in different communities, many minority communities, and organizing, for example, trips to Israel. Okay, so she was a very embracing young lady, and she would get out there and bring in. I mean, recently she organized a gathering of the Hadassah ladies who support our hospital in Jerusalem, and then there was a huge evangelical gathering in the embassy which she organized. And many different groups like that, and many. Look, this event was young leadership, right? It was a young leadership, young diplomats who came together. So she would embrace people like herself from other embassies in Washington. So it was outreach. It was outreach, public diplomacy, bringing the case of Israel to organizations around the country.
Could you speak on what kind of man her boyfriend was like and what was really special about him?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Yaron came from Germany. His family moved to Israel a few years ago. He served in the IDF. He was very quiet and intellectual, very sweet, very smart. He was a senior researcher for the head of our Middle East desk, and he had actually bought her a ring last week. They were going to go today. They were scheduled to fly to Israel, and he was going to introduce her to his parents. He had been here in Kansas City quite a bit. He had spent time. Bob told me today that they had gone on long walks together. They liked each other very, very much. He had been here for 2 10-day visits, and he thought that they were the perfect couple. So Yaron wanted his parents to think that they were the perfect couple as well. So they were on their way to Jerusalem, and after the meeting, he was supposed to give her an engagement ring. And instead, they were gunned down before they could get to the airport.
In your position, sir, would you support what some call a two-state solution, and do you feel like that could end this war?
No. Two-state solution has been going on and on and on. People have been talking about it for 30 years, 40 years. We had a second state. We had a Hamastan in Gaza, and the result was a massive slaughter on the 7th of October. We have Palestinian autonomy within Judea and Samaria. We could expand that autonomy to the degree that won't endanger our security. But the bandwidth for Palestinian statehood in Israel right now has gone from about here to about here, because we experienced October 7th, and our whole concept of security has changed dramatically. We cannot allow Muslim Brotherhood jihadis to be in a hair's breadth from our communities.
You're in a, excuse me. You're in a building that's had a shared violence of its own. What's the message you bring to Kansas City and the fact that we lose one of our residents in the same manner? What's to this community? What's your message?
Well, first of all, there's something working in Kansas City. There's tremendous unity within the Jewish community. And that's something that Jewish communities around the country could learn from. It's evident when somebody comes here and experiences, as you said, this building, the people in this building, the people running the Jewish community. It's evident there's a lot of unity here. And I think Jews all over the country could learn from that. There's a lot of, it's a very partisan atmosphere now. In many places, certainly in Washington, I know. And it's a partisan atmosphere in many communities around the country as well. The first thing you need to do to combat the anti-Semite enemy is unity. The Jewish community has to stand together. And once the Jewish community stands together, it will stand together with Christian communities alongside, because we're just the canary in the coal mine. They come after Jews first, and then it doesn't end. It never ends with the Jews. Okay, they're going to come after others. So there are, I landed here today. I walked into a hotel lobby to get a cup of coffee before I came to the Milgrims, and a gentleman just walked over to me and gave me a hug. I said, do I know you? And he said, no, but you're obviously Jewish, and you represent Israel, and we love Israel. And they just had a wedding last night, and his whole family was there, and they're from a little town south of Kansas. They came up for the wedding, and he didn't expect to see a representative of Israel. When I told him I was the ambassador of Israel to Washington, his eyes just opened up. He couldn't believe it. And he said, wow, thank God I've had this great privilege. So first is unity. The second is courage. Okay, our soldiers are terribly courageous. I mean, we've been at this for a year and a half. My other boys, who lost their older brother, are doing, some of them, 250, 300 days of reserve duty. In the Milgrim's house, I met Israeli soldiers who have done 200 and 300 days of reserve duty. Some of them have lost their businesses. Some of them have lost their income. But they're coming. I mean, I have another son who's touring around Thailand. As soon as he gets his order to come to reserve duty, comes out of Thailand, gets on a plane, and goes back and joins his friends. So, we've lost about 900 soldiers over the past year and a half. My oldest son was one of them. That's, if you take the 1,200 people of October 7th, plus 900 soldiers, over 2,000 people, in American terms, if you do the numbers, that would be about 65,000 people. Right? We're a country of 10 million people. Just do the math. Imagine losing 65,000 Americans in a year and a half. That's what we're facing. Okay, and I think that the story that Sarah tells is a story about the connection, the deep connection, the value and interest connection between Israel and the United States. We're like a little brother to the United States. I mean, the values run very, very deep. And Kansas, by the way, tells a very important story, the connection between the recognition of Israel by President Truman because of his unique relationship with a local Jew, right? Guy runs a haberdashery and is influenced to the point where he says, well, no, we're going to be the first ones to recognize Israel. It runs very, very deep. The idea of manifest destiny, the idea of, coming back and greening the desert, building the homeland, looking for the shining city on the hill. The shining city on the hill was something taken out of the Arbela, the ship that came over to New England. But the shining city of the hill is an idea that goes way back to Isaiah, and even prior to that. So, the Arbela was the ship. Pastor Witherspoon, I believe, right? The shining city on the hill. So we're looking to create that shining city of the hill. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East in the meantime, but hopefully we're just the beginning. More are going to be coming, and it's the only democracy because, think about that. It's this transplant of Judeo-Christian values in the middle of a sea of autocratic regimes. That's a message. We have a message. We've always brought a message to the world. This is our message now. And it's difficult. It's an uphill battle. But we're very much what America stands for, smack in the middle of the Middle East.
Speaking of democracy, sir, it's important in democracies to question or criticize government leaders, military leaders, those actually making the decisions. These two people clearly weren't in any decision-making powers when it came to how the war went or what happened on the battlefield. For those who are still, angry at what's going on in Gaza, what's your message to them about not dragging in innocent people to whatever they want to protest. So hopefully we don't see something like this happen again to, I mean, certainly not government leaders, but especially not innocent people with violence.
First of all, you've got to educate yourself on the facts. That's the first thing I say to people. Understand the facts. If you have an alternative approach to dealing with Gaza, present it to us. We'd like to see less collateral damage in Gaza. We'd like to see less people killed. Nobody's interested in having people killed. But what do you do when, for example, we send in humanitarian aid to the people that are non-combatants, and Hamas jumps on the semi-trailers with guns and masks? I mean, imagine you had a neighborhood here in Kansas City, okay? And MS-13 takes it over. But there's people there that need food. So you're going to send food in, you're going to raise money in your NGO, and then you're going to give it to the hands of MS-13. How long are you going to do that? And especially in Israel, where parents like myself are saying, we're sending our boys and girls to fight, and at the same time, we're sending in semi-trailers taken over by Hamas, which are then used to sell the food, raise the money, and continue the battle against my son and daughter. So we had an insane kind of situation on our hands. And nevertheless, we continue to send in the humanitarian aid. Now we're coming up with a program where, together with the State Department, American effort, where there'll be 4 installations in Gaza, which will expand to 8 installations in time, hopefully over the next month, where the distribution of food will go directly to families and not to Hamas. So the families get what they need. Hamas doesn't get what they need, so it makes it easier for us to contend with Hamas and ultimately defeat them. So first, educate yourself. Understand that we're doing everything we possibly can. Secondly, what is this insanity? What, are you going to solve a problem by shooting 2 beautiful kids in the back? What is that? What is that? What is that going to do? All it's going to do is bring more people together in a determined fashion to stand against this insanity, to stand against this violent kind of anti-Semitism, this violent approach to solving problems. You don't do that. You just don't kill people because you don't agree with them or because they represent something. This is insanity. It has to stop. So we need unity, we need courage, and we need resilience. Not to feign in the face of the assassins who would like to break us.
Question for you. You said something in your opening remarks that there was a possibility, and I want to go back to the attack, that the attacker had possibly contacted Sarah and Yaron before at this event?
Not Sarah and Yaron. No.
Could you just clear that up for me?
Yeah. Well, one avenue that's being explored, it's not conclusive yet, is that he had entered the premises together with the other attendees. And that's how he was able to identify because there were people there from many other embassies. Okay? It's not conclusive yet, but it's quite possible that he entered the hall, the museum, with a permit. In other words, he had registered and, try to figure it out who was who. He didn't want anybody from the, Kyrgyzstan embassy or, the Belgian embassy.
So you believe it was
This wasn't random.
sought out?
It certainly wasn't random. I mean, whether it was not random, before or after, at what particular point, but look, at the end of the day, this is a Jewish location. It's a Jewish museum. The 2 victims are Israeli embassy's employees. It seems to be that, he knew what he was doing, and at the end of the day, he screamed, free, free Palestine. So he didn't scream free the Uyghurs or, or Ukraine. So it seems logical that that's the direction where the investigation will take us, but I don't want to say anything conclusive until law enforcement reaches a conclusion.
Thank you. And I follow up to those and some of the other stuff that you said. What conversations have you had with our leaders in Washington about any other conversations for a relationship between the U.S. and Israel to maybe provide more aid and whatnot outside because of an incident like this? Is there any conversations there? Or?
First of all, there's conversations all the time. As I was walking down from upstairs, I was texting an official in the administration regarding something in Lebanon. There's constant communication. I don't think there's ever been such tight communication with an administration. It's in regards to Gaza, it's in regard to Lebanon, it's in regards to Syria. We have a lot of things going on, a lot of moving pieces. And, I didn't even mention the Houthis, right? They were firing ballistic missiles into Israel all the time. And, of course, there's the big issue of Iran. There's the really big issue of Iran, because Iran, for us, is an existential issue. The Iranians say we're a one-bomb country. So we cannot have a situation where Iran has not only a nuclear bomb, but has a pathway for a nuclear bomb. And that means enrichment. They don't need enrichment to have civilian nuclear energy. There are many countries, a dozen of countries in the world who have civilian nuclear program, but they don't have enrichment. The way it's done is fuel is brought in from the outside under scrutiny, it's processed, and then it's removed, all under scrutiny, international agency scrutiny. So if that's what the Iranians want, we don't have a problem with that. But if they have enrichment and they have a weaponization program, that's a pathway to a bomb. And if they have the bomb, they're going to use it. And until they're going to use it, their proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, are all going to operate under a nuclear umbrella. If all those proxies operate under a nuclear umbrella, we're not going to be able to contend with them. It's going to be like an ongoing Vietnam. We can have a conventional war that goes on for 10 years. We're a tiny, small country. I don't know if you know this, but Israel's the size of New Jersey, except New Jersey is round. It's like a hamburger. Israel's like a hot dog, right? So it's the same square miles, but it's a tiny, tiny country, and it can easily be cut in half. I mean, the whole width of Israel, prior to 1967, was 9 miles wide. With Judea and Samaria, it's a whopping 40 miles wide, okay? I don't think you can fit the contours of Kansas City, width-wise, in Israel, right? So we have to be very, very careful about proceeding to and ensuring that Iran doesn't have a nuclear bomb.
And with that, do you think that there's going to be a greater deal with the United States in terms of how, in terms of our relationship to help in that effort and combating that,
well,
especially after this event?
President Trump has been unequivocal on this, just unambiguous. He said that they cannot have a nuclear weapon. Steve Witkoff, the special envoy and the chief negotiator, has said repeatedly that they will not have an avenue to a nuclear bomb. So in that sense, we're quite sanguine that that's where we're going to go. I mean, that's not going to exist. I have a very, it's kind of unrelated what happened in Washington with Sarah, because, this is a big issue, Iran with a nuclear bomb, and this is, anti-Semitism here in Washington in the United States. But I'm very encouraged by what I saw. When I got to the site Wednesday night, the site of the assassination, I met with Attorney General Pam Bondi, who was already on the site. She had already gotten there. The chief attorney for Washington, Janine Pirro, was already there. The deputy director of the FBI was already there. And as I got there, the Attorney General said, "Mr. Ambassador, this is the President, please take the phone." The President called me there. It was less than an hour after the incident. So I think there's tremendous commitment. There's an attorney, Department of Justice, Leo Terrell, who's been charged with fighting anti-Semitism. I've met few people anywhere in my political life with as much energy as Attorney Leo Terrell. So he's gone at this with gusto. He's not going to tolerate, these chants of from the river to the sea, elimination of Israel. He's just not going to tolerate it. And the administration is going after these campuses, which permit this kind of thing. I go every week to a different campus, and the stories of what Jews have experienced on the campuses is harrowing. I mean, these kids have been attacked physically, verbally, spat upon. They've had their Magen David, the Star of David, torn off their necks. They've been batted over the head with baseball bats. I mean, it's just horrific stuff. You're talking about safe spaces. They haven't had any safe spaces for the past year and a half, and this is happening on dozens of campuses around the country. So this administration is going after them, and they want to put a stop to it. So I'm very encouraged by that.
One more question I have, sir, is for those who didn't know about Sarah until this event happened, and her boyfriend too, of course, what do you hope they remember or just take from the kind of people they were or the type of work they did to really try to make this world a better place? If there was just like one thing to summarize from that, what would it be to you?
Trying to make the world a better place. I mean, they were beautiful kids that had their whole future in front of them and were committed to bringing people closer together. That's what they did. That's what they both did. Yaron was focused on bringing the Middle East closer together. He was a Middle East expert. He was a researcher for the head of our Middle East desk. And here, Sarah worked on bringing groups of people closer together, whether it was organizations or churches or synagogues, campuses, campus activity. They were both bringing people closer together, and that's ultimately what we've got to do.
And that's kind of more around my final question to you as well, is just that you described her very well, red hair, smile, that type of thing. How hard was this for the staff in the office to have this happen, and for her specifically? She obviously meant a lot to a lot of people.
I got to thank you for bringing the conversation down from, the international scope and Iran and Gaza to the very personal. Look, they're broken. I mean, you get up every morning for years and you work next to someone who gets gunned down. And you spend weekends together, you spend evenings together. We have a whole coterie of young people working at the embassy who spent a lot of time together, who love to be together with each other. And all of a sudden, they're gone. And as a matter of fact, they were, the exemplars of a young couple. Everybody wished that they would have a potential bride like Sarah and a potential groom like Yaron. They were the dream couple, and all of their friends are now in tremendous sorrow and pain. But I have done whatever I can. I will continue to do. It's my responsibility. I'm at the top of the embassy. I'm in charge, and I've got to embrace each and every one. It's a tremendous responsibility. I got to tell you, I made the call to the Milgrim family, and it was not easy. And I was able to draw from my experience. I remember the knock on my door telling me about my son. And now I was on the other side of the door. I was doing the knocking. And I drew from that experience and how I felt then in order to first verbally embrace them on the phone when I called, and then, physically embrace them now to spend 2.5 hours with them and just talking about their daughter, my son, our experience as a people, as Americans, as Israelis, as people who just care about humanity. So it was, we have to put the focus on the future. We have to take the beautiful memories of the people that we've lost, and we have to go on living for them. Ultimately, that's the only alternative. Otherwise, we're all going to collapse. We're all going to fall. We're going to disintegrate. But we don't do that. The Jewish people have always been resilient, and I think that's one of the things that connect the American and Israeli people. We're both very resilient. We know how to pick up the pieces and move on. And that's what we've got to do in this case as well. It's difficult, it's painful, but we don't have an alternative. We've got to pick up the pieces. We've got to take the beautiful experiences we have with Sarah, Yaron, and we've got to make this place better. You've got to make Kansas better. I got to make Israel better, and together we make the world a little bit better.
On the local front, you mentioned polarization. This kind of goes back to the international thing, I'm sorry, but I mean, a lot of people have been talking about the issues in Israel. And it's just my impression sometimes, no matter the person I'm talking to, and these are people, some of them work in education, some of them are very educated people, but I'm not always convinced myself that they know everything that they're talking about. I mean, what's your message to people as far as how to deal with with the issues in Israel, how to talk about them in a society like this where we have free speech, we can say anything.
The best case scenario would actually be to come over, to get on a trip, to visit Israel, and see things firsthand. I have seen this repeatedly, where people were not familiar with what's really going on. And I had just a few months ago a very large group of chiefs of staff of governors. They came over for a week. And I spent a Friday night meal with them. We sat till about 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a life-transforming experience for them. They had no idea. And these are people who are educated. I mean, you know, they're preparing legislation alongside their governors. But they had no idea about Israel and what's going on, because there are narratives that are conveyed that are simply fallacious. But when you come and actually see what's going on, it changes your view of things. You know, one of my assistants is an Ethiopian Jew. So I go to the Hill to somebody, one of the congressmen who, let's say, is on the very progressive side of American politics. And I walk in with her, and he's stunned. He said, who is she American? I said, no, this is an Israeli Jew. And he had no idea that we have all the colors of the rainbow, right? And we have hundreds of thousands of Ethiopian Jews, black Jews, who participate 100% in society, to the point where I chose her to be my advisor here in Washington. So a lot of people don't know that, don't understand that. Or that, you know, that they call all the Jews in Israel Ashkenazi Jews, you know, that's Western European Jews. Yeah, but half the population come from Arab countries. Right? So there's an awful lot that needs to be learned, experienced. The most important thing is just don't accept the by rote narratives, because the by rote narrative, we have a lot of enemies out there, and the narratives that are being conveyed are very skewed.
Do you think those narratives, do you think younger Americans are more susceptible to those narratives, or is there any group that is most susceptible to
Absolutely. I'm finding that I'm spending a lot of time on the youthful left and the youthful right. Okay, the traditional values that kept our countries together are fraying on the extremes. And I see that as one of my most important agendas as ambassador. And reach out. I go to churches every Sunday, and very often the congregants will tell me, we need to get you in front of our kids. We need to get you in front of our youth. You got to come to our high schools and to our colleges. So I'm trying to do that as well. I want very much to share with the younger generation. Look, societies change over time. We've got to change. We have to be aware of those changes and address the contours of those changes appropriately.
I apologize, it's my last question. For someone who's lived this loss and experienced this loss, as if it were easy for any parent to lay their head down at night and not feel that pain. When you go back and you meet with the Milgrim family, what message, having lived that experience, will you share with them to hopefully provide some sort of comfort as you head back to Washington?
It's really what I said before. You have to embrace, I'll tell you a story. My son was in special ops for many years, Air Force special ops. And I asked him when he came home once, very tired, and he had been on a march for about 15 hours with 60 pounds on his back, and they marched for, I don't know, 80, 90 miles. I said, how is it that your knees don't buckle? How do you deal with all that weight on your shoulders? And my son said to me, I developed a patent. I said, what do you mean you developed a patent? He says, yeah, I add more weight. I said, what do you mean you add more weight? He says, yeah, I take the prayers of my grandfathers and grandmothers over 2,000 years to return to Zion. I put those prayers on my shoulders, and it lets the weight down. I'm able to deal with the weight. Okay? Now that's something he taught me. So now, what do? I could wallow in my pain, but instead I take him, I put him on my shoulders. Not the past, but I have him on my shoulders as the future, okay? I come from a generation that always took pride in who their parents were. We live in a generation we have to take pride in who our children are. And the Milgrims will take pride in who their daughter was. And that's going to strengthen their resolve to go on living. And they're going to find Sarah, they're going to find her beauty in the beauty that exists in the world. They're going to see Sarah in beauty. They're going to see Sarah in truth. They're going to see Sarah in innocence. And with that, she will continue to live. She'll live on.